Welcome back, and right now we are shifting gears to the discussion tonight, where we're talking about the conflict in Iran, which has intensified and raised concern over its effects on Africa, including the security and economic impacts. Thousands of Africans working or traveling in the Gulf cities like Dubai, UAE and Doha, Qatar are already facing disruptions, with some reportedly stranded at airports. We know several African countries have called for urgent initiatives to prevent the crisis from worsening, and as it is raising tension in Iran, we are seeing a lot of shockwaves and interest on what this impact means for the financial markets, global oil flows and inflation expectations, among other areas. And to discuss this topic tonight, we have an able panel made up of Wycliffe Bishanga, who is an ISPEC council member. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you, Leah.
Looking forward to a great discussion with you. And we also have Professor Exen Iraqi, who is an economist, right in the middle.
Jambo.
Jambo. And we also have Professor Peter Kagwanja, who is a political scientist. Thank you for making time, Peter.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, as we look at what is happening in Iran, a lot of concern over the shockwaves on the global markets. Of course, there's been a lot of travel disruptions and concern for especially African countries, for those who have relatives in Iran and just basically the Middle East. Before we go into the business of the day, looking at the impact of what is happening in Iran, let me just hear from all of you, each of you rather, your views about striking Iran. That's by Israel and the US. I'll begin with you, Professor Exen Iraqi.
I think it came to all of us by surprise, because if I remember very well, US and Iran were negotiating. And the reports we were getting was that negotiating was going on very well. So it seems to me, from a strategic point of view, that was a ploy, because what followed was Iraq being stricken. And the US, Israel, and the allies are giving good reasons why why Iran was hit. They are developing nuclear weapons, and very many other reasons. But in my opinion, striking Iran is a long-term game. Because if you remember, in 1979, there was a revolution in Iran, and America lost a lot of influence. So maybe after almost 50 years, the US is having a chance to hit back or get back what they lost 50 years ago. But it was very unexpected because they were negotiating.
When you say a long-term game, what do you mean?
I mean, when US lost influence 50 years ago, they did not stop at that. They kept planning on how one day they will get back that influence that they lost when the Shah of Iran lost power and the Ayatollahs took power in Iran.
All right. Wycliffe, what do you make of what is happening in Iran?
I agree with Prof that looks like the US has always been keen to get Iran back, because prior to 1979, these were very close allies. But then immediately the revolution happened in Iran, the winds shifted. And that time, Iran then became an Islamic state and refused to recognize Israel, which is a very close ally of the United States of America. So clearly, the plan has always been there. But just recently now, what has just happened, it wasn't expected. The question, I think, has always been, does Iran really have the capacity to come up with nuclear weapons? That, I think, has been the question. Some people believe that it's not necessarily true. The interests could be elsewhere. But I think right now the biggest question is then, how will the crisis be resolved?
All right. Professor Kagwanja, your thoughts on this? It's really a very interesting situation there that's likely to have a ripple effect globally.
Yes, it is. First and foremost, what is happening was not very unexpected. What was unexpected was the timing. In terms of their negotiating, and there's that, and two, already there had been another strike, and we thought that they had seen the danger that can come from this kind of military airstrikes. But the reality of the matter is that I think Donald Trump decided to take a long gamble. The real war is not between Iran, Israel, and America. The real war is between America and China. This is simply, a chess game that is very, very complicated. By invading Iran, it means that you're trying to test the ability of China to come in and what they can do. Second, you are crippling, for the second time, China's access to global energy. They've already colonized Venezuela, 40% of the world, petroleum output. They've now hit Iran, and Iran had closed the Strait of Hormuz, which means that China has lost 10 billion barrels per day, which is supplying its economy. So it has now to look elsewhere for this. And hopefully, if America emerges triumphant, as Trump would hope, then it means that the Middle East is going to emerge as a total vassalage of America, controlling the oil from the Gulf and the whole region, and therefore America will reassert its hegemonic power globally. That's the game plan. But in the meantime, I think what is happening is that it is beginning to have negative ripple effects, more than America calculated. And
Professor
I think that's,
Kagwanja, just to paint a more detailed picture, when you talk about this war, like you say, it's not between Iran, Israel, and the US, but the US and China. Maybe a bit of expansion into that particular point. What's the significance of China's relations with Iran as far as the US is concerned?
Let's say that there are two countries that were geopolitically important for America or for any power that want to control the world. Already, China is ahead of the US in many aspects of technology, from the green technology to now the 5G heading to 6G and so on. So in that area, it is in front. But America is still having a great edge in the military, and it's aware of its military edge. Now, what needs to be added to that is control over global energy, and not the new energy, but the old energy, which is still very important for global economic development. And the two countries that hold the planks of this energy pyramid, one was Venezuela, and the other one is Iran. Iran, not necessarily because of the oil it produces, but that it is the gateway to the oil in the Gulf region. And the main casualty in both cases is China. Now, for Israel, the game is different. It is to ensure that there is no Arab country or Islamic country that ever get control over nuclear arms. It is very worried about Pakistan. It is very worried about Turkey. So if Israel was asked, the next target would be Turkey and Pakistan. But for now, it is content with Iran because it also supports groups that attacks Israel, the Hamas, the Hezbollah, and others. That's basically what Israel wants to achieve. But what they did not know is that this is a country for 50 years, 50 long years, has been preparing for war. Because from the time it was born in 1979 to date, America as a superpower has declared war on the Iranian Revolution. And as such, what they did not know or what they had underestimated is the capacity of this country to fight back. And of course, it's a short-term strategy. The strategy is to make the Middle East unworkable. As we speak, the Middle East is worse than it was during the COVID-19 pandemic. You cannot get in, you cannot get out. Most countries will not produce oil for the next couple of years because their oil arsenals have been destroyed. The American military is getting a beating somehow within the Middle East, not in the mainland, but here. Israel, for the first time, is getting a hitting. So they have underestimated what attacking Iran meant. And one does not know what China and India, and China, India, and Russia are doing through Pakistan to prop up Iran to fight back. One doesn't know, because this is a very stealth world. You know, it's under the water, under the radar.
The accusation on Iran on potentially developing atomic weapons, having analyzed, of course, Professor Kagwanja, what has been happening over the years and the accusations that have been coming up over the years from Israel, do you think that Iran is potentially developing these weapons?
Well, the development of weapons is not a crime. Israel has a nuclear arsenal.
There has been, in the past, we've had the Iranian leadership saying that they plan to wipe out Israel from the map of the entire world.
No, that's not the point. The point is, why aren't they not attacking North Korea? And it's even more vocal in terms of destroying other countries than Iran.
So it's not the atomic weapons?
The atomic weapon is just an excuse. I think the point is that Iran is weak. It doesn't have a ready weapon that it can use. That is known. But it has already the capacity to enrich uranium. What it had not turned it into is a bomb, the way North Korea has done. But I don't think that is the main excuse. The issue is that the game is richer. Now, when they shut the export of Russian oil to Europe, the idea was to cripple Russia by destroying its market. Now, this particular case is now to cripple China by basically denying or cutting off all its oil supplies, choking it out of function. And it will work for a while. China is going to be a little bit weakened because it's not going to get ready access to energy the way it would want to. This is Trump's game. Remember, Trump is a businessman, so he knows how to fight the enemy business. And I think he's fighting war as business. This is what seems to be working.
Professor Iraki, the markets are said to be facing a heightened uncertainty following the US and Israeli strikes that eliminated Iran's top leadership. What can you tell us about how the markets look at this time, Prof?
An interesting question, but I want to react to my neighbor here briefly. Because if the US strategy is to deny China oil, I think I see some unintended consequences. Because Russia used to export a lot of oil to Western Europe. So it has some excess. So we might have now Russia exporting oil to Russia, not Russia, but to China, India, and Japan, and Eastern Asia, because it has excess oil, and there's no oil in the Middle East. So I don't know whether people looked at that angle. But by denying access, China and others access to Middle East, they might be getting the Russian oil, which they might use to prop up the war in Middle East, in Ukraine. Number two, by attacking Iran, I think US is telling other countries clearly, the dictators and other people who have unpopular regimes, that if you don't reform, we shall come for you. Remember what happened in Venezuela? Now it is Iran. Now every person who is not in America's good books is asking, am I the next? But back to your question, the markets. Now, economics is about supply and demand. So by limiting the supply of oil from the Middle East through the Strait of Hormuz, the price of oil is going to go up. And something else that we're not remembering, the price of foodstuffs, because one of the key ingredients nowadays in growing crops is fertilizer. And out of urea that is used for making fertilizer comes from the Middle East. So those are the two consequences, that the price of oil will go up and the price of food in the long run, because food nowadays must be grown using fertilizer. When we are small kids, we don't need fertilizer to grow crops. So as Kenyans, we are going to feel that, because when you talk of inflation, oil or the price of fuel is a very big factor in addition to food. I'm very happy it is raining, by the way, because if the price of oil goes up and there's no rain, then inflation would go up. Politically speaking, that's not very good for the government, because the government has been saying we have tempered inflation. So now if the price of oil goes up, inflation goes up. So I think we may not be in the Middle East. We may not declare our stand against US, Iran, and Israel, but we are going to feel it in terms of inflation. Remember also that Iran is a very big source, is a very big market for our tea. And if we don't export tea, then we are affected by that. We also export a lot of fresh flowers, vegetables, meat to the Middle East. That is also affected. And finally, our brothers, Muslims, usually go for pilgrimage to Mecca. Now they can't. So Saudi Arabia is going to feel the effect of slowdown in tourism. So this war is not just about Israel and US and Iran. It is affecting everybody. Everybody is being sucked in. And I hope they are going to make peace soon so that innocent countries, innocent citizens don't suffer as a consequence.
Wycliffe, your thoughts on how the markets are looking right now? Listening to Prof here, he says, of course, key things, the products that are exported from Iran, of course, this means some of them will not be exported until perhaps the situation calms down in the country. But your thoughts on how the markets look right now, the projections on what may likely be the situation in the coming days if the war persists?
Thank you, Leah. It's true that the markets are facing turbulent times. What is expected is that we're likely to see an increase in oil prices, because what happens is that when the tension goes up, then the oil prices go up. Once the fuel prices go up, as Prof has correctly said, you expect that we're going to have the currency also, pressures on the currency, because what is going to happen is the demand for the dollar, because you will also notice, and actually when you link this conversation with what Professor Kawanja was talking about, is that fuel is sold in dollars globally. And this is part of the things that the American have made sure that there is the dollarization. Now, what that then means is that when there is a slow supply of fuel, the prices go up. Prices going up means that there will be a higher demand for the dollar. A higher demand for the dollar means pressure for our local currency, and then that means inflation will also go up. So that is that bit that is expected. What does that mean? Our import bill will go up. So the total cost, because when you look at our imports, fuel makes a bigger percentage of those imports. So our import bill will go up, but at the same time, we'll have reduced export revenues, because when we are not able to export our tea to Iran, for example. And also remember the other trading partners, for example, India. India buys a lot of our tea and coffee. But we expect, because the closure of that Strait of Hormuz, we expect that India is also going to struggle. And India is just an example here. So when they struggle, it means the cost of living in India will go up. Probably we'll see reduced the demand for our products. But also remember, countries like India, again, we import a lot of stuff from them. We import medicine, we import machinery, we import fertilizer. So probably the cost of those ones will also go up. So we have a situation where our imports are expensive and we have reduced the exports. That means then we have an economy that is likely to struggle.
Interesting. And even further, talking about what you've just mentioned, when we consider the dependencies that a country like Kenya has on Iran, on Israel, on the US, what are the key dependencies that we have on these countries, and how will they be affected if the war continues for, who knows, maybe a couple of months or 1 year? Because we do know that these countries have not made it clear how long the war will persist, but of course they've made it clear they want a regime change. But what if that regime change doesn't come about?
It's true that Kenya is integrated in the financial system, the global financial system, and that integration means that there are interdependencies. Now, we import goods, we share the financial, the settlement systems. When payments are done, we do the payments globally. We share a lot, and remember, even labor. In fact, when you look at what has just happened, is that the Gulf, the whole region as it is now grounded. Kenya has got a number of its citizens working in the Gulf countries. Those are the same people who send remittances to Kenya. So the first casualty will be the remittances. And we know remittances run households in Kenya. Now, we're talking of very fast. We've already spoken about how households are going to struggle that fast, because reports reaching us are showing that the citizens working in those countries are being told stay indoors. So that means their revenue is cut, and immediately the remittances are reduced. So that is a key dependency, and it is likely to affect us big time. But on a global scale, on other bigger things, for example, the remittances that we're talking, the global settlement system, we still have it going at the moment. Haven't had the end of disruptions, but you expect that to happen if this persists.
And when you look at the Strait of Hormuz, the issue there, the closure, and we've discussed it briefly on what the closure would mean for countries, not just Africa, but global countries. The question has been, do you think perhaps OPEC will consider an alternative supply option in the coming days? Is that possible?
Absolutely. You've got to think of an option, because if cargo is not able to pass through a certain route, then you've got to reroute. I do not think there is an option to that. You've got to reroute, only that now it has implications. So one, I think there will be an issue of timelines. So if this was a cargo that was expected to be delivered in 15 days, you will probably take a longer route, more time, because you are using a longer route. But also, there's the cost implication. You're even likely to see shortages coming in. But then avoiding to use an alternative route will be riskier. So we expect that alternative routes will be sought.
All right. Well, Professor Kagwanja, we've heard of investors being advised to favor equities and U.S. sectors, especially during this time where there is that war that has escalated in Iran. But is this advice the very best that there is, perhaps, for investors at this time?
I don't think so, because Middle East is essentially at the heart of global economy, given the centrality of fossil-based fuels, petroleum and gas, in the global economy today. Because we've not transited, we're still going through this energy transition to clean energy. No country today, is dependent on clean energy. We're still on the old oil. And therefore, Middle East will remain for a long time very, very central to the economy. And there is no alternative to basically restoring peace in the Middle East if we really want any investment to take place. Remember, other parts of the world are largely dependent on the economy. Take, for example, India. India depends on, the vast bulk of its energy is from the Middle East because of proximity. A number of countries from Europe are also dependent on this oil. I've mentioned, China. You can actually mention, in addition to that, other countries like Pakistan and so on. And therefore, the main countries, except the United States, will have a very serious problem in all. The United States will have for a while supply because of Venezuela, and it's going to revive the old technology and the networks that were used to control and refine and control the Venezuelan oil, which is heavy. But the U.S. has been used to it. China seems to have been locked out of the game, but it will still access because it has invested a lot in terms of the piping and all that. So it will still access that oil in a way, but with some control by the United States, because the United States is now the ruler, almost the ruler of Venezuela. So what one is saying is that this is not a question where you can say this zone is safer to invest and this one is unsafe. It's not the case. Just like in Europe. Europe is at its worst situation since the Second World War. just because of the war in Ukraine and the arraignment around those. So Europe is not a safe place. America, of course, is not a safe place, and the world is not safe. And all this because we have changed the modus operandi, the environment that used to obtain and make countries like China rise from poor nations to superpower. And the situation was that we had committed ourselves to a rule-based international order. And this rule-based international order was based on certain principles that you are going to respect democracy, you are going to respect human rights, and you are going to allow free market to operate. And on the basis of those principles of rule-based human rights, democracy, and free markets, then the world thrived for almost a quarter century, from 1989 to now very, very recent years. Now that is changing. Now we have entered a world stage in our international relations, where unilateralism and militarism, reliance on military in order to assert authority, in order to show power, is now becoming the rule of the game. And what is happening? Countries like China are now threatening that this has to end. Now, America specifically is refusing to allow a multipolar world order to emerge, where countries negotiate and work as equals. Obviously, the strong ones will always be respected. They will always have a lion's share of the economy. But small countries will also feel safe. That's the nature of a multipolar world order. Now, the bombing of the bombing of Iran and the previous destruction of Iraq and Syria is an attempt to roll back, the development of a world and go back to a hegemonic world order.
So where the world essentially just relies on U.S. as a superpower.
On one country as a global cop, policing every corner of the world.
Do you foresee a time, Professor, where the U.S. will not be the superpower?
No, it is coming, because look at it this way. If you look at the study by PricewaterhouseCoopers and many other countries, by 2050, the current order of the G7 will have changed dramatically. Only the United States will be left as a member of the G7 countries, the Great Seven. And even the United States will be number 3 from an economic perspective. We're talking about China, followed by India, the United States, Indonesia, Mexico. When you run that country, the study has shown clearly. Now, what will happen is that power has already shifted, even as we speak. Power has shifted from the global north to the global south.
Professor Kagwanja, is there something that the world perhaps does not know? Looking at how the U.S. has conducted itself, there's a sense of, we do not care the results. Looking at how the U.S. president is even asserting himself over this whole issue of Iran, and of course, how he's been handling African countries and other states, trying to sort of bully them into his way of trade, toe the line, or we just put you in a segmented place where, we no longer work with you or trade with you. What do you make of how the U.S. president is dealing with this issue of Iran? It feels as though he's not very worried about a surge in oil prices. Is there something we do not know?
I think there's more than that. Trump started by basically trumping over his own population. Remember, this war in Iran is not authorized by Congress. Has not even consulted Congress. He never did so in Venezuela. So he's running, he's running a presidency that is a super presidency compared with the vision of the founding fathers of the United States, where war is authorized by Congress and the governing bodies in the United States. Look at the war that was waged in Afghanistan, the war that was waged even in Iraq by George Bush I. Those were authorized by Congress. So even if there were a mistake, this was an American policy. What we are seeing in Iran, what we are seeing across the world is absolutely not the policy of the United States. It is Donald Trump himself. It's a presidency gone rogue, literally. And the world, Trump is planting the whirlwind, the wind, and the world as a whole is reaping the whirlwind. And America is part of the victims. Let's not demonize America as a country. America as a whole is facing the hardest time in the history of that democracy because Trump is a rogue president. Now, his decision with Netanyahu to just decapitate a country, forgetting that this is not a country that is the normal country. It is basically a revolutionary country. And what happens is that you decapitate one and another one rises up. And perhaps the one who is going to rise in Iran is going to be worse than Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. So in short, the world is basically, Trump has driven the world back to the 19th century, where it is not just might being right, but it is where you are so careless and so useless and so egoistic that you don't care about anything else. Even the United States, because I don't think the United States is going to benefit from this. Why? Because the structure of the world, whether America wants it or whether Europe wants it, is changing. And it is changing because the world is developing.
So it feels like the US is trying not to adjust with the times and the evolution of course, economies, the need for, just the other day
it's a MAGA.
We saw Botswana, the Botswana president, and of course, Zambia. We've heard of different African heads of state, and of course also Rwanda's president coming out very clearly and saying, hey, we are not going to toe the line. We are tired of being told what to do. And one of the heads of state telling the US president, if you want to trade, then you come to our country, then no trade, but we will not be coming to the US. Professor Iraki, when you listen to what Professor Kagwanja is saying, it begs the question, in previous times when we have seen wars like this one's emerging, such as the one in Iran, what has been the impact when it comes especially to issues on how oil has been performing?
I think the latest was the war in Ukraine. I think the price of oil went up by about $5. So anytime there's a war, resources are always involved, and the prices of major commodities adjust, whether it is food or whether it is oil. But this one probably has a very big impact. I think I saw one time the price of oil going up by about 30%. That is quite significant. So there's nothing unusual about what is happening now. We expected that because of interfering with supply and demand of oil and gas. But maybe to tie up with what my friend was talking about OPEC, OPEC might end up increasing the quotas so that they can supply more oil. That might stabilize the price of oil. The other consequence that might go against that is the insurance is going to go up, because if you are going through the Gulf, if you have a ship going through the Gulf or through the Strait of Hormuz, insurance companies are going to raise it up. But what is coming clear is we must look at the political and the military part of the war, and we must look at the economic part of the war. Because the military part of it is about Israel, about Iran, and about America. But the economic part of it is affecting everybody. Even the people who are going to ride the matatus next week are going to start feeling it. And that is the problem of war, because it affects a lot of innocent people. If you ask somebody on the streets of Nairobi why Iran, Iraq, why Iran, US, and China, and not China, US, Iran, and Israel are fighting, he may not tell you. But you see that price in the commodities he's going to buy, in the fuel he's going to buy, he's going to see that. So the question has always been is, how do you protect the innocent when there is war? It is very hard. And as my friend said, it is clear that America is pursuing her own interests. As to what happens to the rest of us, I think that is probably a secondary issue.
So we're saying, as compared to different war times, oil is not performing, is rather set to perform worse than previous years? That's what the impact is not going to be as bad as what we've seen in previous years?
No, it might be worse this time. That's what the way the market has reacted. Remember that two people are suffering from this war, the exporters and the importers. A lot of fuel, a lot of oil that passes through the Strait of Hormuz is not just from Iran. It is from Arabia, from Saudi Arabia, it is from Oman, it is from UAE, it is from Kuwait. So even those countries that seem to be innocent are suffering. You also must look at it from the demand side of it. India, China, countries like Japan, they are suffering. And in my opinion, what might stop this war from lasting a long time might be economics. Because I'm sure China, Japan, India, and other countries and exporters are going to put pressure on the combatants to tone down because the economies are being disrupted too much. So there's no question that the price of oil is affecting all the economies because the world economic systems are interconnected.
All right. And how about the equity markets, Prof? Comparing to previous years, and I know you've mentioned oil is set to perform even worse. What about the equity markets?
The equity markets, from my research this morning, they're not doing as expected. Remember, equity is one of the areas where you can put your money to if you have excess money. I think the area that I think is going to do better than equity would be gold, because people will see gold as safe haven. So the price of gold is probably going to go up. But equity, I don't think, is going to perform very well. Remember that when there is a war, you interrupt supply chains. You interrupt trade. So the expected profit from companies is going to go down. So if you have any equities or any shares, then you expect to get less dividends. And by extension, the demand for the price of equities is likely to go down. Unless you are bold enough and say that I'm going to buy the shares now, I'm going to buy equities and stock now, because eventually the price will go up. If you are that bold, you can start buying now. I don't know whether my friends want to invest in that. They are bold enough. They can talk for themselves.
And we're talking about shares. Let's hear from you, Wycliffe. Prof says maybe it's not a good time to invest in certain products. Of course, you're favoring gold at this time when we're having the issue in Iran. But looking at energy stocks and oil, your views, is it a good time to be buying any of these stocks?
Now, the issue with the stocks is that at times the fundamentals change quite fast. And just to take you back, we're talking of businesses struggling, basically. There's a likelihood of businesses struggling. So the question then will be the fundamentals of this business. Because if the business is likely to struggle, let's take an example of a company in the energy sector, just like to match with your example. So this company gets it hard to get supplies and probably is unable to meet the demand, but because it's unable to get the supply. So that means their trading is limited and probably their profitability will go down. So as an equity holder, you benefit from dividends gain just before we talk about the capital gains. But the primary objective is that you're getting dividends. So if the profitability is low, then you are likely not to benefit out of it. So that alone is going to scare people away from equities. However, we have another school of thought that there's going to be panic sell. And therefore, you are likely to benefit from a purchase which is likely to be undervalued so that you can make a kill. And we also know that at times conflicts do not last forever. So really there, it depends on a person's thinking and mind frame, and also the anticipated time frame for the conflict.
All right. And of course, there's the question, and we have been following up this story for the last couple of days, the question of how long this conflict is set to last. And just looking at what is happening, Professor Kawanja, the US and Israel are saying, hey, until we get a regime change, this war that we've declared on Iranian leadership will persist. But the likelihood of getting that regime change, is that even possible right now?
I don't think it's possible. It's a good idea to do regime change. I think the idea has been to not necessarily get regime change, but destabilize the country. Look at what happened to Libya. Libya was a country that was stable, very economically viable, even investing in the rest of Africa, or Libya, hotels, and so on. But today, it's on its belly. Literally, almost in civil war for the last, since 2011. I mean, that's the country. Then you move from there, look at Iraq. Iraq, also, you kill Saddam Hussein, then you have decapitated the country, and then the rest is chaos. You get ISIS, the terrorist groups and all. Then you move to Syria, you try to get, Assad, and it doesn't work. But the country is left destabilized. I think that is the same strategy they would want to have in Iran. That you destabilize Iran, you bring a Shah back, then you have the country in civil war, and eventually it is easier to control a country in turmoil. It is also more lucrative for major powers to do, economically speaking, it's more lucrative, it's more rewarding.
You know, when you mention that, it takes me back when you just talked about capitalizing on war.
Yes.
Talks about DR Congo,
yeah.
What you see in DR Congo, the war and conflict that has persisted in that country. So we're saying Iran might head in the same direction?
In scholarship, we call it conflict entrepreneurship. You make more profit from conflict than you make instability, because when you have a stable country with the systems working and with the resources that are needed, for example, cobalt from Congo, to make our batteries and so on, you have to pay taxes, you have to do this. But when there's conflict, it's just security. You buy, those commodities at a throwaway price, sometimes as gifts. You can even sometimes give a bottle of vodka for cobalt worth $1 million. So it's super profit you're making. We discovered that in Sierra Leone with the diamond. And the same case with Angola and Namibia during the war. Gold, selling for a song. So that is what one would think is the scenario they want to create in Iran. You destabilize Iran, you weaken it, and so on. But unfortunately, Iran seems to have prepared for this for 50 years.
How long do you think this conflict can?
The war, it is already there are calls across the world for it to end, because it is good. It's not good for anyone.
Do you think there's a likelihood that Israel and the US will back down?
No, already they are beginning to pull back. Look at what is happening in Jerusalem. Look at what is happening in Tel Aviv. The Israelis have never seen this kind of, they have never experienced this kind of life, because we are told that this is Iron Dome, the dome that will intercept every missile coming in. It's not working. It's not working anymore. Look at the American military establishments in the entire of the Middle East crippled. So even now, if the US wants to organize retaliation, with its embassies brought down, meaning intelligence to manage this war is not there anymore, because they have the Iranians are not foolish. They started by hitting embassies, the centers of logistics and coordination of war. Then they went to the militaries, and now they are crippling the oil wells and the oil supplies.
Prof, say the US and Israel back down. Don't you think perhaps still the leadership that remains within Iran will still want to have retaliatory attacks, especially after the killing of their supreme leader?
I said this at the beginning, and I have no evidence, just my hunch. Russia is not lying down and watching what is happening there. Vladimir Putin is not having his vegetables and going to bed. Xi Jinping is not watching just like that. Pakistan next door, which is an ally of Iran, is not just watching. So this is not a war that you can say that is not being fought. And these countries are going to fortify, in whichever way, they are going to fortify Iran. And therefore, if America does not back away, if Israel does not back out, then this is a protracted war that is going to hemorrhage the world, not just Iran, but hemorrhage the world economically. So somehow, the United Nations now is the weakest. We've never seen the multilateral system weaker than it is, possibly way back in 2019, in 1919, when the League of Nations collapsed after invasion of Ethiopia and other countries. Now, so the United Nations can only speak, but people are going to see the need for a multilateral order, and they will have to walk back to the United Nations and begin to resolve this issue from the United Nations Security Council. And I think the America, the Congress itself is already, its hands are clean, very clean. So the American Congress is a card that can be played by the world to basically bring Trump back to. What if he is impeached tomorrow? The world will come back to normal.
And by the way, there's been reports that he's using the conflict in Iran as a distraction,
yes,
away from the Epstein files, and of course,
yes,
his impeachment and many other issues bedeviling the U.S. right now.
That's what the Americans call the tail wagging the dog. You know, normally the dog is supposed to wag the tail. So when we have serious internal matters, like you are accused of raping children, then that is impeachable, then the next thing you do is to do the worst internationally. And therefore the tail begins to wag the dog. That's what the Americans say in their slang.
Well,
but essentially that might be what is happening. But I think the world would want this, this war to end. The African Union has pronounced itself. It has said we need to de-escalate. We need to search for peace. We need to negotiate. Iran will not have a problem basically negotiating. But remember, they are also mourning their supreme leader. So whatever they are going to do is basically out of anger and bitterness. And you can see the fury of it. You can see the fury of Iran and what it is doing to avenge its supreme leader. So that is the. But to see a single missile coming from Iran against the backdrop of the propaganda that everything has been leveled, even Ayatollah is dead, everything is dead. We are truly in a post-truth world. It is truly a post-truth world where lies are more faster and sweeter than truth.
All right, let me just hear from each of you as we come to a close of this discussion. I'll begin with you, Professor Iraki.
I think there are two things you have left out. That maybe the crisis in Iran might be a silver lining. Maybe it's time we started exploiting our oil so that we become more energy efficient. So we need to start exploiting our oil. Maybe we need to revive our refinery in Mombasa so that we're not worried about such crises. Number two, I think it's the time we shifted more towards electric cars. So that is less reliance on energy. And finally, if I can respond to his question, your question about how long this war will last, my hunch is by the end of this month, I think somebody will back down because of the economic consequences. Yeah. The exporters are suffering, Saudi Arabia, other Middle Eastern countries that export oil, and the importers, big countries like China, big countries like Russia, not Russia, but I'm talking about India, China, and Japan. They are suffering. So because of that suffering and the rest of us in Africa and the rest of the world, I think there will be a lot of pressure for the combatants to make peace. So my guess is by the end of this month, we should be talking of less bombs and less missiles in the air.
Wycliffe, let's hear from you.
Leah, for me, I'll just talk about what the opportunities that lie for some countries like Kenya. You see, for the longest time, we believed that some hubs, international travel hubs like Dubai, was the safest. And even with the neighbors that it has, we always believed that somehow we never envisaged a situation like this. And that tells you that anytime you concentrate travel to a certain hub, we run to a risk like the one that we are having currently, because travel has sort of been curtailed big time. And that is principally because Dubai is a big hub for international travel. So when you think about it strategically, a country like Kenya should be able to position itself in future to be an alternative to situations like this. This is the time that we need to seriously think about modernizing and modernizing our aviation system and also working on the aviation infrastructure. All that we need to do is maybe become more reliable and also improve on efficiency to achieve efficiency. That way, we then know that in future, we will always be an alternative. And also let's remember that we're always the gateway to Africa. So these will work very well. And related to that, I think it's important also as Africa to seriously think about the intra-Africa trade. I know that there's something happening with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, but we need to see more speed into achieving this. Because if you think about it, the intra-Africa trade will help us, because right now we are thinking about what is going to happen to the foreign exchange. The dollar rates will go up. But if we had intra-Africa trade, we'll probably be using our local currencies. So that goes away. We are currently thinking on how we're going to get our raw materials or our finished products shipped from China to Kenya or to African countries. If we were trading between ourselves, we will be having shorter timelines for doing trade.
All right.
And as Africans, I think we really have to think that way.
Professor Kagwanja, final remarks.
Yeah, I think Kenya need to concentrate on finding out what we are going to do with over 416,000 Kenyans who are now stranded across the Gulf. If you listen to the internet, those are crying out for a helping hand. So we possibly need to hear what we're doing. Second, we need to begin thinking about this policy about exporting jobs, because now what we have seen is that this is extremely risky. So we need to consolidate on our economy, creating jobs within and employing our own, because that seems to be more viable, because the markets in the Middle East are now shut. And even if not shut, the Middle East is shuttered as a peaceful place anymore. Dubai is no longer the haven of peace. It is now, something else. So the war in Iran is basically transforming the world, and it's a lesson to us Kenyans, basically to rely on ourselves. And as Ikrif is saying, we begin to look at what we have inside. Turquoise oil need to be starting flowing, and we need to start using it. We need to enter into partnership with Uganda and get their oil to this country, and we begin to use it, refining it here and using it here as part of the East African Commonwealth.
Thank you for your remarks. Yeah. Well, this has been a very insightful discussion. Thank you, Wycliffe Bishanga, ISPAC Council member, to my very right, near right. Thank you for making time.
Most welcome.
And Professor XN Iraki, an economist. Thank you for making time. And Professor Peter Kagwanja, you said earlier you prefer the political scientists.
Yeah, not an economist.
Or an economist. Thank you for making time. Such an insightful discussion. Thank you. Well, that has been a discussion on why the Middle East conflict matters to Kenya. Definitely one that has been very insightful, shedding more light on what is happening and the impact this is likely to have on Kenya, the African continent as a whole, and of course, other global economies. Thank you for watching. My name is Leangare. Our sign language interpreter earlier on was Wilson Mushora. As always, have a good night and God bless you.